Welcome to Under Investigation, Stories Beyond the Badge. Join a seasoned detective as he steps away from the crime scene and into the lives of fascinating individuals. Through candid interviews and thought-provoking conversations, we explore the stories that shape us, covering personal struggles, triumphs, and the powerful intersections of faith, family, and life. Each episode brings unique perspectives and inspiring insights from people living diverse, authentic lives. Now, let's dive into today's story.
Well, welcome back to another episode. Actually, this is part 2 of Bridget Mesa's story. And Bridget, again, welcome back. Thank you for sharing your story. This is part 2 of a 2-part series of Bridget's story, where she talks about she has been talking about her, I don't know, what would we call it? I don't want to call it an adventure because that's, I think that's the wrong term, but I guess just your story, right?
Yeah, just, like my presentation that I've done, addiction behind the badge. That's what I call it.
And we will certainly get into that a little bit, but just to summarize for some of our listeners who don't really know what's been going on, Bridget has been talking about her experience with early years of law enforcement and dealing with alcoholism, and even some mental health issues, including, suicidal thoughts and even attempts. And again, I'll say, like I did earlier, there's a reason why that didn't work. And I'm glad that you're here to share the story. So where we left off was, Bridget, you were in recovery, or not in recovery, but you're in treatment, and you were talking about how good the food was. And I don't know if I believe that, but then I thought about, oh wait, I know where you were, so of course there's good food there.
Yep.
But yeah, it's interesting because I've driven by that place actually numerous times, because it's right off the highway there, and
Yeah.
it's I've seen that, and I've always wondered what it was, but until you said the retreat, I'm like, oh, that's what that place is. I wasn't sure what it was. So kudos to them. But anyway, so let's talk, let's get back into it. And so you're at the treatment center, and kind of pick it up from there.
Yeah, so went to treatment, 45 days-ish, something like that. And then, close to the end, they kind of, they start talking about, well, what is life going to look like now when you leave here? It's like, I didn't want to leave, to be honest. I was terrified to leave. I was terrified to go, and then I was terrified to leave. I loved it there. I wanted to live there forever at the time. I was comfortable. I was safe. I was just everything about it. Made some really good friends who I'm still on a text chain with today. And that was how many years later? Because I was in, I believe it was like 2018. So yeah, we're talking, many years later, and we're still in contact. But I, talking with the family and taking the recommendations from the retreat, I decided to go live in a sober house. And I don't know if anyone else listening knows this, but St. Paul is one of the biggest capitals of, the sober community and sober living. So I decided I'd give that a shot. I was willing to do whatever it took to keep myself sober and happy and healthy. So that's what I did. I went into a sober living house. There's like 12 females in this Victorian style house. 2 bathrooms. I'll say that was challenging.
That's a problem.
Yep, you got a lot of females under one roof. It was, there was some stuff, but it was good in the end. And I stayed there, oh gosh, I want to say, we'll just say 6 months, I believe. So
Just curious, because I'm one of those people. I do not know much about that philosophy of living. I mean, what does that mean when you go to a sober living or a sober house? What is that?
yeah, so it's a place that, I went to the retreat house, the women's retreat house. And it's, reasonable rent. It's definitely affordable. People that maybe even can afford it, they're still able to go there. There's grants and different things like that that they offer, but you're in a house with, a bunch of other people that are, trying to stay sober and go to meetings together. And then you have a house manager who checks in and, they ask that you go to so many meetings a week. And it's really just, an honesty thing. There's
Okay.
nothing that, you don't go in and blow on a breathalyzer every night you get in or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
really just holding each other accountable. And
Okay.
um yeah, it was a good transition for me. It was nice to be with some other people because, being in your young 20s and trying to get sober is not easy. Definitely
Right.
not easy.
So, real follow-up question, and then I want to transition into what that is like for somebody in their early 20s to try to get sober. But is it safe to say that sober living is really just having 11 roommates? I mean, your day-to-day function is pretty normal outside of maybe these weekly check-ins.
Yeah, it's pretty normal.
Okay.
We go hang out, go to a movie, go on walks, go to lunch. It was pretty normal. It was kind
Okay.
of just like I never went away to college and lived in a dorm or anything like that,
Hmm.
but I felt like that was possibly what college might have felt like.
Okay.
Just being in a house and doing your everyday things. I worked as a paraprofessional at a middle school at the time. So I would go to work and come home and have dinner, and we all had our assigned chores, and yeah, it was
Wow.
it was good.
That's awesome to hear. I mean, I mean, I've heard the term before, but I guess I've never taken the time to ask what it looked like. So you said something, and I want to go down that path. You made a comment that it could be I don't want to say difficult because that's my word, but tough being somebody in their early 20s trying to stay sober or be sober. What kind of challenges did you face, right? Because when I picture somebody in their early 20s, that's their bar running entertainment days, and that's obviously is not an option for you at this point. So tell me a little bit about that. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, there was a lot of shifting that went on, whether it was changing group of friends or losing friends as well. There was a handful of friends that when I went to treatment and got sober, they didn't really have time for me then. It was more of, well, we are going to go to the bars, and since you can't, then I guess you're not a part of our group. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of struggles with that.
So
And yeah,
those
just,
those I'm sorry, those phone calls and text messages stopped. I'm assuming.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. That's tough. All right. So I apologize. Keep going.
No, you're good. Yeah, so it was just, it was a big shift. And even the little things of like, it was hard even, going up to the family cabin because, I would drink up there. I would go out on the boat, I would drink and be swimming. And it took a little while to adjust, to be able to go back and do those same things without the alcohol. Any
Yeah.
kind of, reminder was hard. And just, and also just how surrounded, you know, our society is with alcohol. It was like there wasn't a lot of like sober events or sober activities, but the more I got involved with, the sober living, and all the other sober houses would like get together and do things, and they had a sober softball league. And so just looking for those things and realizing that, oh, I can still have fun without the alcohol. I can still do these activities. It took some time. And I think that, that's pretty normal to, you know, take time and really get a good, strong grasp on your sobriety before you start, maybe going back to some of those activities that you used to drink at, or
Right.
concerts. Even, going to a concert would be challenging. It was like, okay, like I'm gonna go to this concert and have a Diet Coke instead of a rum and coke.
Right. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. It's interesting because you said it perfectly, of how prevalent alcohol is, and just my words again, but just everything we do socially. I mean, go into the lake, have a beer, go into a concert, have a beer, go. Yeah. No, I totally get it. And I think it's just so norm for us that we sometimes forget that those people who may be struggling, or trying to remain sober, it's not that easy. How was your family? I mean, were they on board with this new lifestyle that you were trying to live out? Or, I mean, you had mentioned, alcoholism, runs in your family as well. So I'm kind of curious where that balance was.
Yeah, they were super supportive. Even, looking back, it I had a I had to make a lot of amends. In the 12-step program, you go through a step where you go and you're able to make amends with people that you may have harmed. And that was hard, but it was also freeing at the same time. So being able to sit down face to face with some of my family members and, admit my wrongs, and you don't really sit there and, apologize and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." It's more of, this is what I'm going to do to make it right. And I'm going to show up now. And I'm going to show up as healthy Bridget instead of who I was before. And, it's hard, you know, having to sit in front of someone and admit your lies and the wrongs, but it's
Wow.
also very, like I said, very freeing, and gives you that power to move forward and move past that and just leave all that crap, behind you.
Let's talk about that conversation you had with your biggest fan, or your biggest supporter, Grandpa. Were you able to have that conversation with him?
Yep, I was able to have that conversation with him, and honestly, that was probably the easiest one
Oh,
because of
really?
how,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, because he was just, like I said, he's so calm,
Hmm.
like so calm and so forgiving. And you know how Minnesota always has like the boys state hockey tournament
Hmm.
every year, down at the
Big
X. And
big deal. Big deal. Yeah, we know
yep,
that.
big deal. He would always cheer for the underdogs. And my mom will be happy to hear me say this on here, but he was always the one that would cheer for the underdog, or he was always backing up that one person that might have been struggling. And so him sitting down with him and, you know, telling him where I went wrong and, what I want to do to make it right, he was just like, yeah, absolutely. Like, he's so forgiving. And, he said, he's like, I knew you could do it. And I love you no matter what happens.
Wow.
And it was, yeah, one of the easiest. I think that was one of the easiest
Interesting.
conversations I had.
I actually was thinking it might have been the hardest just because of the relationship, but I get the way you're explaining it totally makes sense to me. So, and I bet I'm assuming that ended in a great great big hug, or at least that's
Oh,
what I'm
yeah.
imagining.
Yep.
Oh, wow. So, what other challenges did you have? I mean, it sounds like there were a lot of social challenges. How about like the cravings? I mean, did you struggle with the cravings of just wanting more, or were you able to get through that pretty quick?
Yeah, I think the cravings were prevalent when I was in treatment.
Hmm.
Just even on the days where we would have to talk about some hard stuff, it was like those thoughts would come in your head of like, oh man, I could just go for a beer right now or something to just take the edge off. But yeah, they kind of just came up randomly and not, never like super strong with me. I saw it in other people, but yeah, they weren't terrible. I think I had a pretty strong support system that if I did start having any sort of craving, I would pick up the phone right away and I would reach out to someone and just tell them, just to be able to tell someone, hey, I'm having a craving, and then just talk it through. And then it would pass. It would
Yeah.
definitely pass.
Have you ever received that call from any of your friends, your sober friends? Like, hey, I'm struggling, and you received that phone call?
Absolutely.
So, and obviously I don't want to break any confidence with any of your friends or anything like that, but What do you tell somebody who calls you up and says, I'm having a tough day. I want a beer, or whatever that may look like. What do you tell them? I mean, what's a good thing to tell somebody who might be struggling?
The first thing I say to someone that reaches out and, says something like that, I say, okay, well, first, you picked up the phone and you called me. So there is part of you that doesn't want that.
Hmm. Yep.
And that's awesome. And the second part is, all right, so let's play the tape forward. What does that look like if you do have a beer right now? What does that look like for the rest of the night or the next day?
Yeah.
And being able to play that tape forward, I think really discourages people from picking up that drink and understanding that, you've been sober X amount of days, months, years, and it's okay to start over. Believe me, it's no judgment. I would never judge anyone for relapsing or anything like that, but is that really what you want?
Yeah.
And that usually, that usually is what people need to hear, is just talking through that tape. And okay, so you're going to have a beer, and we both know it's not going to be one.
Yep. And then what?
And
Yeah.
yep, and then what? And then we're back to square one,
Yep.
which is okay. I'm here for you if
Right.
we do get back to square one. But do we really want to do that? No.
Right. I think that's great. I really do, because um, that the non-judgment piece, but forcing them to also think forward, because you and I both know the rest of the night is not going to look good.
No.
And whatever, uh, you know, however extreme that night may look like, the different versions are not good. I mean, all the way from little drunk to I end up in a hospital. So I think that's good. I'm thank you for sharing that with me, because I have received that phone call, and you know, sometimes you don't know what to say, you know,
Right.
and I think that's just a great tool, is to focus on, is to say, okay, let's see what that looks like. So I want to swing back, talk about law enforcement just a little bit more, about the
Yeah.
culture of law enforcement, and from your experience as a police officer, and we're certainly going to talk more about where you're at in life now, but from your experience in law enforcement, how prevalent is alcoholism within the law enforcement community?
Very. I think you and I, when we spoke a week ago, the word epidemic kind of came up, and I think it's a very serious problem. And I think, a lot of people in law enforcement, it's one of the biggest coping mechanisms,
Yeah.
because it's easy, it's accessible, it's just right there. It's all over. And yeah, I think it's when I think about it, I get kind of sad, because it's just like it goes so unnoticed sometimes
Mm.
that you wish you could just make it stop, or
Why do you
get in front of it.
why do you think it goes so unnoticed? And it's kind of a rhetorical question, because we talked about it a little bit, but in your opinion, why do you think it goes unnoticed?
I think it with just how society is just alcohol is just such a big part of society that it's easy to hide. I think
Mhm.
that it's just kind of the thing that you do. And I've been to bonfires, like when I was early on in my career, and I'd hang out with coworkers or whoever, and it's like you go to a bonfire and you sit around and you drink, and somebody brings a PBT, and we all just let's see who's the highest. And it's like, okay,
I
yeah,
laugh
that's
because I've been
it's
to those.
yeah. And it's like, and I'm not saying like everyone that's an officer that lets loose once in a while or goes out and gets drunk has a problem, but
Right, right. No, and I
that's
agree.
why it's so unnoticed, because it's, how do you know when things are actually bad for somebody? Like, how do you separate that? Well, the only way is if you talk about it. And that's something that doesn't happen because of the fear of, potentially losing your job or not understanding what help is out there or whatever the case may be. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. And and to be clear to anybody who's listening, I've been a cop 28 years, and I agree with you 110%. I really do. The one thing that I can say with my experience is that I think it was more prevalent back when I started. And what I mean by prevalent is like in groups like the bonfires, those scenarios. And I don't see that as much. And maybe it's because I'm now the old guy and I don't get invited to those anymore, but I don't see those larger gatherings happening. But we talked about it. We talked about it earlier. There's a real fear, within the law enforcement community of losing your job. And some of the things that you did experience as a result of your alcoholism. And losing that is real, and there's a financial impact, and I'm not justifying it. I obviously I'm not justifying it, but I'm like, I think that's why it's like so hush hush taboo type thing. And it takes things like this, people coming out and talking about their story like you're doing, Bridget, is huge. I mean, that's why when we got connected, I mean, this particular podcast, these 2 episodes that we've been, that we're recording, has been so important to me, because, it's like, wow, somebody's actually willing to talk about it publicly and openly and be vulnerable about it. So again, kudos to you for sharing all this. But that was one piece that I wanted to get out, and I want to challenge, any cops, or what, I'm going to open it up even a little more and just say first responders, the people that see and deal with the stuff that we see and deal with on a regular basis. They're struggling too. I've got some very good friends who are in different first responder roles. As we know, right, we become friends with the cops and the firefighters and the ER workers and the paramedics, and so we have friends that we see it in, and it's kind of scary, and again, you talking about this has been huge. So let's fast forward just a little bit. I mean, you're in a healthier spot at this point in your life, not right today. Oh, well, hopefully you are today, but and part of the story, the timeline, you're out, you're in sober living, you're working at a school, things seem to be going well. What's the next step for Bridget? What happens after that?
I'm still missing, part of me that, as the career aspect is, I still wanted to be in law enforcement, but I didn't know how that was ever going to be an option. With everything that happened, and, I wasn't sure what was going to be said or what was going to be asked if I did apply. And, I decided maybe I'll try firefighting. I don't know if I'll be able to get into that, but I wanted to get back into that public servant or first responder career. So I got hired as a firefighter, and my past came up, but they were very willing to, give me a second chance. And I remember sitting down with the fire chief before being offered the job, and I was, pretty vulnerable and just, told them what my life looked like and where I was at now. And, I remember her just saying, like, all right, like, I see potential and I'm going to give you a chance. And she did. And, that was pretty cool, because I didn't even know if I would be able to get into that. So I did that for a while, but still, I just could not let go of the dream of, being a cop, and tried to apply at some places. And every time, my past would come up, or, they would call my past employer, and then it would be, nope, we're not. Red flag.
Yeah.
We're not gonna open that. Nope. It didn't matter, whether I was sober now or not. It was just, it was
Right.
super discouraging and it was hard. I mean, I struggled, I found myself kind of teeter-tottering back on that, depression a little bit, but
Mm.
luckily, with, the support system I had and the resources I had, it didn't spiral out of control, but yeah, it was hard. So
Were
I ended up
you were
just
you
kind of,
making it were you making it like through the interviews to the background, or were you getting the declination, right in the interviews because you'd talk about it, or maybe a combo? Where were you getting cut at?
yeah, it was more so, I wasn't in the beginning, I was pretty scared to come right out in like my first interview and, say what happened or this or that. And so it was more, and it wasn't that I was trying to hide anything. It was just, I guess I was struggling with, just bringing it up. I mean, I hadn't really, talked about a lot of my stuff with anybody
Yeah.
besides, my sponsor at the time or maybe some, housemates at Sober Living. But so it would come up when, they'd make that phone call to, the past employers for references or
Hmm.
whatever. And then it was, nope,
Yeah.
no
And
thanks.
and we both know, right? I mean, during the background, it's going to come up at some point. So I was just really
Yes.
curious on where. So you get the break for the fire department. So thank you to that chief who had a bigger picture and was willing to give you a chance. So I think that's something that I want to recognize because in this community of first responders, once somebody gets black labeled for whatever reason, it's really difficult to get back in. And
Hmm.
kudos to the chief for seeing something that others couldn't see. So I just want to make a note of that. So you're a firefighter. First of all,
I am.
sorry. And you know
Oh,
what I mean
yep.
by that. but
Yep.
so kind of pick it up from there. I want to keep hearing, how this story evolves.
Yeah, so I did that for a while. I loved it there. It was a great department. I felt that camaraderie piece, that family, that belonging that came back. And then, like I said, I was just still missing, a little bit of my dream. And, that was a part that I had to either just give up because of how discouraging every time I'd get that thanks but no thanks email.
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of just stepped away from that and was like, nope, I'm not going to keep doing this to myself. Like it's not helping. I'm going to have to figure out a way to just let this go. And fast forward a little bit, try it out because I was only part time at the fire department. They didn't have full time at that time. So I was just working part time there and then worked at a few other jobs, just trying to find my place. And, I'll tell you, I tried every job you can imagine. I mean, I was willing to try anything to try to fill that void or find something that I was content with, and it never happened. It was just I just bounce around and keep trying different jobs. And my poor tax guy, every time I go on to do my taxes, how many jobs we have this year?
you
A
know,
lot of tax forms.
yeah. How many employers?
But no, and then I met my partner and we wanted to get a house and ended up over here in Wisconsin because the market in Minnesota just didn't have what we were looking for.
Hmm.
The price wasn't right. So I separated from that fire agency and we bought a house out here in Wisconsin. And I got on a volunteer fire department out here right away. And was still just kind of bouncing around trying to find, my job. And it just so happened that we met our neighbors and we were hanging out with them one night on doing some game nights. And one of their friends worked at an agency out here. And, we started talking cop stories and, how you get going, all the shop talk and all that. And he's like, well, maybe you should put in an application. And I'm like, I don't think so. And we started talking a little bit more and more. And I just told him my story. And I'm like, listen, like, I've tried,
Yeah.
and I said, "I just can't take the rejection anymore, like, it's hard. It's so discouraging. And he kept encouraging me, just, I think you should, you know what? I think you should. I don't see why not. And thought about it. I prayed about it. And I decided, all right, I'm going to give it one more chance. And so I did. And yeah, I got in there in the interview, and that was the first interview that I was just straight up honest. I'm like, this is what happened. This is where I'm at now. So that way there was no questions at the end of that interview. There was, I didn't leave that interview wondering, oh, what are they going to find out? Or are they going to, is my drinking going to come up when they call my references or this or that? And no, there was no questions. Everything was on the table. And I remember getting a call from the boss man, and we had a long conversation about my past. And he, again, just like the fire chief, he said, I'm willing to give you this second chance. And hearing those words, I instantly started crying.
Wow.
And I don't think he understands how much that meant to me. I mean, that was such a, what do I want to call it? It was an absolute miracle, and something that I didn't know could happen. I didn't know if I was ever going to get back into law enforcement. And so hearing those things were just amazing. I mean, I get emotional right now, even
Yeah.
just thinking about it, because I remember that day, and I remember
Yeah.
the phone call, and I remember coming out of my room after being on the phone and, looking at my partner and instantly crying, saying, I got the job.
Wow. Well, I will tell you, 28 years of doing this job, you are the first person that I have heard that have gone out under those circumstances and have come back. So, I mean, I don't know if my 28 years of experience in rubbing elbows with cops means anything to you, but that's a that is a miracle. That there's
Yeah.
nothing less than calling it a miracle, because you certainly the odds were stacked against you. Um, but I think it might also, just hearing what you're saying, I think a lot also has to be about how open and honest you were about it. One thing I heard you saying earlier is you didn't want to talk about it. Not didn't want to, but didn't really know how, or to bring it up during
Hmm.
these other interviews. But look what happens. You open the book up and say, okay, here, this is it. And that shows integrity, that shows honesty and transparency. Let's be honest, if you were the boss, isn't that what you're looking for?
Right.
I would
I mean,
be, you know.
yeah.
So wow. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank
So
you. Yeah, and I should say
mhm,
that when I did get hired in this agency over here in Wisconsin, I started out in the jail. So
mhm,
it was a nice stepping stone to getting back, because I had been out, for so long that, it was a nice stepping stone of
yeah,
like getting back in. And, I had never worked in a jail before. So that was super cool and exciting.
yeah. Well, it's good experience too, right? I mean, you're learning how to deal with, inmates on a different level, as far as communication and just kind of lifestyles and everything else. So, yeah,
Yep.
that's fantastic. And then you recently transferred out of the jail, and where are you now?
Yeah. So spot opened up for on patrol on the road. And I contemplated it, because I'm like, okay, maybe is it too soon? Should I give myself some more time to get my feet wet, getting back into the swing of things, getting back into law enforcement? But I'm like, I still, I still want to get out there. I know that's what I want to do. I still dream about it. And so I applied for that spot and went through the process. And again, sitting down um, with my boss and sitting in his office this time face to face, and talking a little bit more about my past, and talking about what he's seen while I was in the jail. And the words that I remember him saying were, the person that your past agency describes or the person that you've described to me in the past is not the person that I see sitting across from me today.
Hmm.
And that was powerful. I mean, that meant a lot. And, he said, let's give this a chance.
Wow.
And here I am in the
That's
process of transitioning back out on the road.
that is what a story of redemption is the
Yeah.
first thing that I think of. But I do have, again, the investigator mind in me. I've got a couple real practical questions for you. So, you know what this lifestyle is going to be like. I mean, you're not quite back into it yet, but you're darn close, right?
Hmm.
You know what you're going to see. You know what you're going to deal with. You know the stress that is going to return to you. What is your plan? I mean, what is your plan to deal with that? Because last time we know what you did, right? So what is your plan? And I know you have one because you're prepared. I could tell by talking to you that you're a thorough person. So what is your plan to deal with these stressors that are, obviously going to come at some point?
Right. Well, I would say the number one plan is to never pick up that drink. Um, because we know how that goes.
Yeah.
That is not that is not a part of Bridget's plan or her coping mechanisms. And the biggest thing is, you know, just talking about it. If something talking about the call, being able to reach out. And when I first started at this agency in the jail, they had a peer support team,
Mm,
and I wanted to get a part of that so fast because not only did I feel like I had a lot to offer, but I also wanted to put myself in the middle of the circle, in the middle of the herd, and to set myself up for success. And by doing that, you know, I'm not only a part of the peer support team that, can reach out to people that went on a hard call, but I also know that I have people that I can reach out to at any time.
yep.
And so I think just that constant reminder of, you know, something's on your mind, just talk about it. And learning about this agency and, in the short time that I've been here, I know that the fear of losing my job because I'm struggling is not even on the table. Um, and that's a, a big that's a big hurdle for an agency to overcome, is to know that, for the officers to know that they don't have to have that fear. We have a solid peer support team and resources. And yeah, I would say the biggest part of Bridget's plan is, to speak up if something's bothering me.
Don't suffer in silence. We've heard that, right? So
100%.
wow. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other things that you do. So you'd mentioned earlier that you've done presentations, sharing your story. You've shared your story with me and our audience. But you have a presentation that you call what? Addiction behind the badge. Is that accurate?
Yep, that is right.
So, and what do you do there? Do you essentially share your story like you've done with us for the last, I don't know, whatever, 2 episodes?
Yeah, so I was invited to speak at the Wisconsin statewide peer support conference because they were looking for someone to do a presentation on AODA, alcohol or other drug addiction, and among first responders. And I sat on that for, gosh, I would say like 6 months on whether or not I was going to do it. And I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I feel like I have the utmost support from my agency. I don't have any worries about that. And so, yeah, I shared my story, talking about everything that, you and I have talked about in these
Mm-hmm.
last two episodes, and addiction, and, being able to overcome and never give up, not just because something may have happened in the past, or like you said, you're blacklisted. I just don't want people to feel like there's never another chance, because there can be. And, that's I've become very passionate about this, and it's, it's very healing to me to be able to share. And not only, am I willing to help others, but for me to be able to get up there and talk about it, it's, it is therapeutic, and it's super healing and powerful for me as well.
So, since you've gone public with it, obviously you do a statewide conference. People are going to know who Bridget Mace is, right? That's just kind of, especially in our
Yep.
circles, right? Word travels fast. So obviously your story was known by your administration, but now your story is probably known by your fellow, coworkers and stuff. Whether it's on patrol, that's coming into your very near future, or the jail. How have you noticed any change? Has anybody asked you about it? Have you been able to use that? I don't want to call it publicity because I know you're not seeking publicity, but have you been able to use your story to speak with others within your
Yeah,
agency?
absolutely. Yeah, when I've had, coworkers reach out that were struggling, and, even just to go to an AA meeting, or want to meet up for coffee and just talk, or questions that they had about, what is an AA meeting? What does it look like? Some of those questions, and, whatever the case may be. And to be able to be that support for someone else, and to know that they trust me enough to, call me up or text me and ask for advice, or, open up to me, is, that in itself is pretty cool. And when I did the presentation with the statewide conference, I think I think I've been contacted by 5 different people in law
Mm.
enforcement from different agencies that are struggling with some stuff that they have going on. And, we've been able to meet up and talk and check in on a weekly basis. And so, I told myself before that presentation, if I can just reach one
Mhm.
person, then this is so worth it. And I mean that it's been above that.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Well, we talked about that click earlier that you heard, and the gun didn't go off, and now look, there is a reason. Of 5 people directly that have heard your story, that have reached out. But now think of all the people who haven't reached out, but yet have been motivated by your story to make change, or maybe reach out to their partners. You know what I mean?
Yep.
There's this ripple effect, right? That there's the knowns, but then there's the unknowns, and
Right.
that is huge. And I hope you hang on to that very tightly, because it's an honor to be able to. It may be weird to say, but I think it's an honor for you to be able to share your story. Especially with the circumstances. So we're gonna wrap up here a little bit, but I want to put a bow on this just a little bit, like some action items. What are some things that from your experience, everything that you've dealt with this whole thing, um, what can you tell, like maybe either supervisors or coworkers who may have someone in their professional realm, or what even in their personal realm, of somebody who they suspect might be struggling with alcohol or drugs, or something like that, especially in this first responder community? What could you share with them to kind of watch out for, or how do they talk to these, the people who are struggling?
Right. You know, it's hard because I know a lot of agencies are different, and whether they do have a peer support team or not, I think that, if there are people listening that don't quite have the peer support thing going on yet, it would definitely be a beneficial program, to get going. And I think that's going to be part of the change, among law enforcement and addiction or mental health struggles. But I would say that, if you're thinking that someone's struggling, whether they're just not themselves, they're calling in sick a lot, even if other coworkers are coming up to you saying, "Hey," like, trying not to rat them out, but at the same time, trying to, like, raise the attention that something's going on, you know, just be there for them and encourage them that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You hear that more and more. And I kind of like that. You know, everybody expects us to be machines, and we're not. You know, at the end of the day, we're human, and we have human emotions and human reactions, and, you know, light bulb moment for some people, maybe, you know, cops aren't robots. We do have real life struggles. So, do you have anybody, you know, it sounds like you have like the Wisconsin side of things. Are there any resources, if there's a cop listening right now, I mean, are there any peer support teams or statewide resources, or maybe even, you know, regional resources that you know of that, you know, maybe offer peer support to maybe an agency that doesn't have their own peer support team or anything like that? Are you aware of anything that somebody could reach out to?
Yeah, I mean, we use Hakes Wellness. They're one of our resources that we use, and they're um, I'm not exactly sure about Minnesota. You might be able to touch on that a little bit more, but over here in Wisconsin, our peer support team can be dispatched to wherever in the state, surrounding agencies, jurisdictions. So, you know, if something happens, or if, you know, let's say a sergeant is not sure what to do with one of their officers because of what's going on, you know, they can reach
Yeah.
out to any peer support team, anywhere, any agency, any jurisdiction, and we will put a team together and we will
Nice.
do what we can to, you know, wrap our arms
Nice.
around them and get them the help that they need.
Yeah. I mean, over in the Minnesota side, you know, we have the Metro CISM team. You know, they're you know, they do a lot of debriefings, defusings, that kind of stuff, but they also offer peer support for agencies maybe that don't have their own resource or something like that. So I think they're metrocism.org, I think, is their website. I don't know if how much you want to share of your resources over there, but yeah. So if you're looking for resources, again, get a hold of me if you need to. If you need to be connected into the Bridget, we'll certainly can do that as well. And again,
Yes, please don't hesitate to reach out. Like I said, I'm going to give, you know, my contact info. You already have
yep,
it, but if anyone wants to reach out or even just have coffee or meet or text, anything, I'm here for it. So,
well, speaking of coffee, and at some point, you and I need to connect in person because I'd love to buy you a
yes.
coffee, and I'm going to throw the same thing out, you know, that you're doing with your peers and everything else. Bridget, I offer my phone number to you. Call me 24 hours a day if you need somebody to, you know, talk through some struggles or something like that. But I want to throw that towards you as well, and quite frankly, anybody that might be listening here. You know, obviously, you know, Bridget, you have my phone number, but if anybody here, just send me an email. I'll get it. I'll call you back. You know,
Awesome.
we need to be here for each other. That's the bottom line. And one last closing thought to any officer who may be struggling. What do you want them to hear from you, who's been there?
Yes. You know, I think back to what would have helped me, what, you know, what I could have heard, but I think, you know, if someone's out there struggling, um, you know, and they're playing with those scary thoughts, I would say, don't give up. I know that's, you know, super cliche of me to say, but just please don't give up. And, you know, your story could change lives just like I'm, you know, trying to help others through my story. And there's still hope. And you just have to open your eyes a little bit wider to see that light, even though it's so hard to do when you're in that dark hole. But, you know, if you're out there and you're struggling, and I don't even know who you are today, but I can tell you that you're loved, you're supported, and there are so many other people out there that want you here.
I don't think I could say much more to that. You're not alone, And again, it sounds so cliche, right? We keep saying these buzzwords, but it's true. It really is true. This culture is changing. This first responder culture is changing. It's changing for the good. You're no longer on an island. There are people, there are confidential resources. There are people like Bridget and myself that are willing to go out of their way to have a cup of coffee. I always joke and tell people, I like to buy people Caribou coffee because I prefer Caribou. That's not a sponsorship, but
No.
I do. That's my favorite drink, and I'll buy you one. There's plenty of those around here. But Bridget, thank you so very much. So thank you. Your story was very moving to me personally, very moving professionally. I think you're doing great work. I really hope that your presentation, Addiction Behind the Badge, catches on. I'd like to bring you over to Minnesota at some point, but we'll talk offline about that.
Yes.
If that's something you're willing to do. I obviously I've got certain connections within certain areas. But if you're struggling, people, give us a holler, give us a holler. If you need somebody right now, there's obviously the 988 phone number. You can call it, you can text it. You can get a referral. There are resources out there. You just need to take that first step. And for those who may have somebody in their lives that might be struggling with addiction or mental health issues, again, same thing. 988 is a good start. But Bridget, thank you so very much.
No, thank you. I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. I mean, your podcast is amazing, and I've enjoyed listening to it. And yeah, you're doing great things, and it's just really, really, really cool to see someone put something like this together. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, some of my podcasts are very cheesy, but I'll tell you this one, or my episodes, I should say. But this one, I have a feeling is going to be well received, probably shared, and I would encourage anybody listening to this, please share this particular episode. This is not self-promotion, I promise you. This is just important stuff about real lives, real struggles with real people. So Bridget, thank you so very much. Have a great weekend, the rest of the week, and we will be in touch soon. But thanks everybody for listening. And again, if you want to get a hold of us, it's weareunderinvestigation@gmail.com. And of course, you can just check us out on Facebook. And I even started Instagram lately. What do you think? Should I do TikTok? I've never done TikTok.
I think TikTok is great. We need to reach those young ones out there, and they're on the TikTok. So
I might be trying TikTok soon. I have no idea. My kids think I'm crazy, but who knows? Maybe I am. But thanks again, everybody. Have a great afternoon or a great evening wherever you're at, and we will talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Under Investigation. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to dive deeper or stay updated on everything we're working on, check out our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/weareunderinvestigation. We'd also love to hear from you. Got questions, feedback, or a story to share? You can text or call us at 763-634-1210. Your input helps shape the show, so don't be shy. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and keep investigating.